So last week, I asked you guys to give me your best rhythm game hot takes, and I actually got a lot more comments than I thought I would. I'm not going to bore you with an intro or anything like explaining what the Rhythm Games hot take series is going to be. You already know the drill, you've seen videos like this, so let's just get into the first take. We need more rhythm games like Not ITG and Rhythm Doctor, where the challenge is primarily trying to read a beautifully obscure chart and not who can get RSI the fastest. I think you're overblowing the intensity of rhythm games that supposedly give you RSI, even though it's not as common as people think. Games like Eterna, Osu, O2 Jam, Poppin', any game that requires you to use a lot of movements and more or less break a sweat. I understand what you mean, but I don't know if we need more. I feel like we have a decent amount, but if you feel like that criteria isn't fulfilled enough, I don't know. I guess just reach out to people and see if they're interested in creating one. Most of the limits a player has are self-imposed. In other words, I'm not a hard rock player. Especially in a game like Osu, there is this weird pressure to fit into the box of a double time player or hard rock player, and this mindset is instilled from such an early point that players might never realize that their potential is so much more than they realize. I agree with this to an extent. There are definitely points where people just kind of accept what skill sets they're good at and don't really go through the effort of trying to improve said weaknesses. This is pretty common in any rhythm game that has the option to excel in multiple skill sets, but obviously people gravitate towards a certain skill set they find they're good at or attracted to more, and they just don't bother with anything else. So they decide to say they're X player even though they've never bothered trying to excel in other skill sets. I always preach well-roundedness in rhythm games. I think players should always try to play as many different types of skill sets as they should and just kind of try and develop better fundamentals, but obviously a lot of people get stuck in this mentality that they're X player or built for X type of charts or maps. So yeah, I would say it's self-imposed and people should learn to get out of their comfort zone a little more often. Bimani is practically the sole reason the rhythm game genre is still underground. If they were more willing to make their games better and accessible to markets outside of Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and a few locations in the US, I guarantee that the number of people who actively play rhythm games would double at the very least. So yeah, you would see an increase if you were to increase the amount of machines around the world. I'm not sure where in particular you are thinking, but yeah, that would definitely solve some sort of problem in their marketability and, would allow more people to play the game. But from what everyone has seen over time, the biggest way to market your game is through more or less influencers, I guess is the term. And usually a lot of these fall into the category of being a top player or just a pretty cool personality that is very talented at the game. Also, Bimani fans are on average, at least from my experience, a lot older. I don't think they understand how the modern rhythm game landscape works. Bimani Boomers are a completely different breed from my own experience. Some of them are more tolerable than others, but I don't think they understand how to actually market a game nowadays. It's not how it was back then, where Dance Dance Revolution was such a riveting concept on its own that the game was just thriving in popularity. Same thing with Guitar Hero. Guitar Hero Boomers have the same mentality. But yeah, I agree overall with your take on Bimani. I think they're pretty much ruining or throwing themselves into the ground with not being able to market their game properly because they don't cater to top players or try to make the game more fleshed out or more accessible to top players, and B, I don't think they really care about them. They don't really support them that much, aside from hosting their shitty Konami Arcade Championship tournaments, where that's really their only marketable tactic, at least from what I've seen. Combo scoring is fun and adds a lot more intensity to good scores. Yeah, and I think that intensity is pretty unnecessary. Combo scoring as a whole is obviously flawed. There's so many flaws within it, given it undermines, just general fundamentals like good, well-rounded scores that have clean accuracy, and whether those misses are spread out, is irrelevant within combo scoring, which is dumb. It just incentivizes players to play a way that is very one-dimensional and just not representative of a player's overall ability to score well on said map. Does it make it more intense? Yeah. Does it make spectatorship more interesting in tournaments? Yeah, to an extent, but is it fair? No. Just because a rhythm game is on mobile and not free doesn't mean it's a bad game. So the base price of a mobile rhythm game is not what really throws me off. I couldn't care less if a mobile rhythm game was $5 or $10 or hell, even $20 if they really wanted to go that far. But it's the DLC that kind of throws me off, and especially if you don't have access to seeing what that DLC looks like firsthand, you're kind of just throwing your money. It's like a gamble almost. Like you don't even know if you're going to end up enjoying what you're playing, and a lot of the DLC might not even be catered towards you, which can also be very unfortunate. It's really the DLC that takes the cake in making up a grand majority of the revenue for mobile rhythm game companies, but it's also way too expensive. Like, in order to even play certain games like Ubeat or Reflectbeat, you have to spend, I would argue, $50 to $100 to have a decent catalog of songs. But I think rhythm game charts are worth $1 or $2 a piece. Given the precedent that's been set by so many other rhythm games, I'm gonna have to disagree with that sentiment. So no, the game on its own is not bad. It's just the principle of content selection and content availability that kind of throws me off, especially given how expensive they can be at times. Age doesn't matter in this game, especially in rhythm games. Sure, new players will quick to get a grasp on how the game works and adapt to it, and therefore improve much further. But if you're much older than that, with enough effort and dedication, and some time to spend on as well, you could still compete against other people with a relative ease. Not to mention, the older you are, the better mindset you can develop and the smarter you improve. So I totally disagree with this sentiment on a lot of fronts, given speed decreases as age progresses. Now, there are cases like Thor where he is literally playing better than he was back in the early 2000s than he is now, despite taking like an over-decade break. But I can tell you that is not common at all, not in the slightest. Speed does decrease with age, and I would argue it can decrease in a lot of things. So your speed will go down, you're probably not as technically proficient. The only thing that would probably stick around is your accuracy and general technique. So the whole effort and dedication thing is kind of bullshit for the most part. I think the term gets thrown around way too much, or that saying gets around too much. So yeah, you can still compete with the big dogs as you get older, but you're eventually going to hit a point where it's just simply not possible. Younger people, their brains are developing so fast. I already talked about the concept of neuroplasticity before, so I'm not saying it's not impossible to be good at an older age, but between a 15-year-old and a 35-year-old starting a rhythm game at the same time, the 15-year-old is most likely going to succeed due to what I said before, neuroplasticity. They develop muscle memory and muscle faster, and they're just simply going to be a better player in the end. That's just how age works. Mina and Peppy both have incredibly negative views on the VSRG community in general, and highly skilled players in particular, that led them to directly harm their respective games. I can't really speak on Peppy too much given I don't really know him. I've had an interaction or two with him on Twitter that was less than favorable. Regarding Mina, he doesn't like people in general. He doesn't talk to people really. He's just not a very social person. He couldn't care less about what anyone's doing or what anyone thinks about what he's doing. But does that mean he's harmful to the community? No, he doesn't really interact with the community at all, if ever. He's kind of someone that just works behind the scenes nowadays and just develops for the game. Has he been on his best behavior 100% of the time when he is in the public? No, he hasn't. But would I say it's harmful to the future of the game? No, I think that's a bit heinous to assume. Kicking you out of the song on failure should have been left in the Stone Age. That's not a gameplay feature. That's a tool used to get more quarters per hour in the machine by making an excuse to shorten play sessions. I wouldn't doubt it if that were the case for some arcade rhythm game developers, but you also kind of have to think if you saw someone brand new, or you saw two drunk people stumbling themselves on a DDR machine and you had to wait 10 minutes to play next. Would you rather them drunkenly stumble around for 10 minutes, or would you rather have them be able to fail out? So yeah, I think in an arcade setting, especially in a public arcade setting, it should kick you out if you fail. It just makes everything more convenient, and I think it's just a generally okay tool overall, albeit not favorable for people who want to keep playing, want to keep improving at the game. But again, if you fail, you fail. Kind of makes sense in the end, even if, their intentions were for monetary purposes. The ITG community, I feel, will not grow enough to be one of the more mainstream rhythm games no matter what they do. Not just because accessibility, but also due to the way the community does things for it being inconvenient for the new player compared to DDR regardless of how inaccessible it is. For me, the biggest reason is that the game is so weirdly separated. Like, you have your stamina players in one area, and then you have your FA players in another area where things are just, really confusing. Especially since FA players practically play on a different game virtually. I think that strange separation in players and almost even community, I would argue, is just Very strange. I don't understand it. It's obviously a cultural thing, like especially with stamina, the whole East Coast stamina thing and the stamina RPG series, but it's not beginner friendly at all, not in the slightest. It doesn't incentivize players or new players to get into the game, and the FA Plus thing doesn't help at all either. Both of them, I don't really care for anymore. I used to preach about ITG being one of the best and fleshed out rhythm games ever, but given how separated everything is nowadays, I would probably retract that statement pretty heavily. The majority of rhythm games don't try to properly teach new players how to play. Yeah, I would probably say so. I think a lot of rhythm games don't have proper tutorials or reasonably made tutorials, because the only people that should really teach you how to play rhythm games are prominent community members. Or unless the game is made by prominent community members, you're not really going to learn much. I've tried my best at making tutorials for Eterna. I think I've done an okay job at it, but I've noticed for games like Osu, you don't really see top players talking about how they improve at a game, and if they do, it's normally pretty vague. They don't talk about how they develop their fundamentals or what their training regimen is like, and if they do, you kind of have to scrap around for that footage. So this is kind of a message to top players of rhythm games, like take the time to make a decent fleshed out video. I'm not talking about a stream highlight, make an actual video talking about how you got good at X type of skill set. And yeah, that goes a long way. Players are always looking up to top players on how to improve in certain ways with their rhythm game, or even just how to pick it up or what to look for when you're first starting. So yeah, I don't know, get on that. Rhythm games where the music is unaffected by your performance are pointless. By what degree? When I watch a 2DX play and I hear the music all over the place because the player is messing up, that is jarringly bad to listen to. It's awful. There's no way I can play a game like that where if I'm playing and it's affected, like, if I miss, I don't hear it. And if I'm, playing a little offbeat, the music's offbeat, I feel like I would just be more offbeat than for the rest of the song or something like that. Like, it wouldn't incentivize me to play more on beat. I don't know. I don't get that at all. I think it's a horrible concept. I don't like hit sounding in general. I think it just overcomplicates rhythm game charting, and it just makes the charting process even longer than it has to be. So, yeah. Rhythm game YouTube content scene is dog shit. Are there really that many YouTubers who are making rhythm games in general, or is it just generic Osu tubers churning out the same content over and over again? Because to me, it sounds like the latter, and I don't even want to talk about it at this point because I've said my piece on stream multiple times on how one-dimensional and boring, and even like the documentary side is just it's just so underwhelming, not as thoroughly researched, uninspired, or it can even be derivative at times. Like, it's just not that good overall, so I'm just gonna kind of leave it at that. And that's where I'm going to end the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Probably going to do another one, or at least announce another one next week or maybe in the next 2 weeks, so be on the lookout for that. Thank you to all my patrons for supporting the channel, and if you'd like to support the channel for more rhythm gaming content like this, go ahead and check out my Patreon, drop a sub if you're new here too, and check out my other links below. I'll see you on whatever video I upload next, and take care.